So let's get things started. We'll go full screen here. And as we did before, we will start our tasting course with hors d'oeuvres. And I can say, what could I say to everybody? Bienvenue à la cuisine photographique, or welcome to Photography Kitchen. So let's get started. And we're going to start with an image from Cape Cod. This is Nobska Light. Let me get out of full screen here. And yeah, it's fine. Actually, the exposure, as I like to mention, if you take a look at the histogram in the upper right, you can see the exposure is kind of perfect. It goes over close to the right. And what was the main thing here? We have to protect these highlights. And we zoom in on the side of the lighthouse, and you can see when I move the cursor over in here on the brightest spots, underneath the histogram, you see the values. So you can see 95.7, 95.6, 93.3. If that were to hit 100, that means there's no data there. It's just pure white. So that it's critical to protect that, which is why I always preach for people to use the histogram whenever you have anything in your image that is white, meaning, oh, white lighthouse, the clouds, snow, etc. As far as shadows go, I personally don't even concern myself with them. Now, if I look up in here, there is a little blue, very faintly blue triangle right here, which is telling me somewhere in here is a pixel or two that is 100% black. And if we zoom in and scroll around, let's see, can we find one? We might not even be able to find it. I mean, it could literally be a single pixel. I'm not seeing anything show up blue, so certainly not anything to concern ourselves with. So I'll just turn that off. So what are the issues here? Well, we got a couple things going on. Actually, there's a dude standing in front of the door here. So I think he's got to go. There is a sign. That's up to you if you want to delete stuff like this. But let's just do some basics first. This one's going to be a gentle basic. I'm going to bring the shadows all the way up to open up the foreground. And let's see, do I want to open up the highlights? Yeah, let's bring the highlights down a little bit, because that will give us a little more leeway to open up the overall exposure a bit. And that helps. We obviously have too much sky above, so we're going to have to deal with that. Also now, as we've done this, the colors are kind of off. And this sky is really kind of weak. So let's get started on here. And up, I see a question from James Bell. Do you see that? Did you type it in? He raised his hand, but he didn't type anything. Diane lost her chat room box. Okay. Hold on a second. She'll get to the chat room. Let's continue on in the meantime. So before we start the edit, and this is what I recommend you do, take a look at the thing. What is wrong with the image color-wise? What's wrong with it composition? Compositionally, I think the lighthouse is a little too too much in the middle. It's almost exact. Not quite, but it's a little dangerously close. Also, is it off at all? Kind of hard to say, but let's deal with that first. And I'm going to get the cropping tool and rotate it a little bit. Let's see, when we go to rotate, we get our grid, and I'm looking at the walkway at the base of the tower, or the base of where the light is. And I want to make sure that that line is going through the same place on either side. And I'm also looking at the chimneys on the lighthouse building behind it. In fact, I'm going to go with that. I'm going with the right taller chimney and making sure that, see that one lines up a little bit. And sometimes you can sense something is off, but you're not sure where. And it can be a ridiculous amount, but the eye can see it. And notice I just did a rotate of minus 0.42 degrees and to straighten the whole thing out. Now, is the lighthouse still off? Hard to say, but we're going to leave it for now. Color-wise, I think the whole color is off, but it's off in different places. The bottom is too yellow. So what does that mean? It needs more blue. Actually, the top needs more blue too. So let's cut to the chase and add some blue to the entire image. Oh, and that's looking better already. Now, remember that these sliders show the opposite colors. So if something is too yellow in the image, bringing it over to blue will cancel it out. It'll actually go neutral before it starts adding blue. And it might seem weird, but if something's a little bit too red, Even if the thing is not green and not supposed to be green, adding green to it will neutralize that out. All right, so as long as we're here, let's deal with the sky. Let's go ahead and fix that. So we'll come up to here, hit the sky. Now this one is just an hors d'oeuvre, as I mentioned, because this is just going to be a simple one. This is going to ease us in. And I'll tell you, as I look at this now, I still think the angle is off a little bit. All right, I have a question here. Do I adjust for white balance? You know, most of the times, no. And the reason is because in an image, there are so many different white balances going on typically. I could sample off the lighthouse. In fact, we'll do that in a second. Just hold that thought. While I have the sky, let's add some blue to it. Well, there we go. That looks a lot better. And I'm just going to hit enter and be done with that. To Gloria's point, let's go ahead and white balance off of the lighthouse and see what it does to the rest of the image. I'll pick in here. And yeah, it didn't hurt anything. Was it a huge difference from where we were? No, but yeah, I'm okay with that. Typically, if I'm really concerned with the place I'm visiting, I will bring my color checker passport out. I always do this when I'm out west because it's very difficult to white balance off of the red dirt. But something like this, sure, the white lighthouse worked just fine. Again, as I'm looking at it, it's bothering me. I got to hit the R key again and bring up that crop and see. I'm just going to look at the lighthouse. I'm going to back up. Yeah, I think the lighthouse was off a little bit. And yes, we ended up having a slightly different rotation, but that looks better. So we've got the sky in pretty good shape. Now, how about the foreground? Couple of different ways to approach this. I can use the brush to paint on the foreground, or what I could do first is just get the greens. So if I scroll down here to Color Mixer, let's get the eyedropper, and I'm going to zoom in and now just pick up one of these greens about right here. And you can see in the kind of color palette it gives you over here that the green is coming in towards the yellow. So we can either shift to hue here, or we can just click on the dot and move it over to the green a little bit. And look what happens down below. Now it looks so much better. In fact, there's some brown in here. Yeah, there was some brown, but it still looks a little too yellow to me. So I can get the eyedropper again, come over to this, whatever this color is. And in this case, yes, it's gone to orange. Let's bring it over to more of a green. And look there, that fixed that. Great. So we'll hit enter on that. What else? Now we've got the roof of the lighthouse. I think it should be a little bit more intense red, the way I remember it. And again, when you're at a place, stare at things. Stare at the things you think you're going to have to edit later, because chances are you're not going to remember it. If you stare at it, then you're going to be able to remember when you get back to the editing part what you have to do. So let's come up to the masking panel up here, and we're going to create a new mask and use the brush. And again, remember, keyboard shortcut for the brush, of course, is K, because why not? All those Ks in the word brush, ridiculous. So I want to make sure auto mask is on, and I'm going to just paint through here. And notice since, and actually the chimneys are a similar color, so might as well add some warmth to those as well. And you don't have to be as exact as you think, because it does have a feather on it, so it fades out. Let's go ahead and add some more warmth to it. So I'm going to push it over to the red and add a little bit of yellow as well. And I think that looks a lot better too. So let's hit enter on that. I forgot to make a virtual copy of this, so I'm going to command on a Mac, control on a PC. And I'm going to actually reset the first one to where we started. And here's where we are now. Before I go any further, I'm going to crop this thing. I'm going to hit the R key, because how you crop is going to affect the depth of color and the luminosity that you're going to want. It sounds odd, but it does happen, and we'll see that in another image. Now, this was stuck on original, and notice there's a lock next to the original. I have to unlock that, and now when I drag, it will just drag in one direction. Also notice that I am using not the rule of thirds grid. I am using the golden ratio. Again, as a reminder, under Tools, under Crop Guide Overlay, Here's the golden ratio. To show you, here's rule of thirds. Excuse me. The problem I have with the rule of thirds with most landscapes, not all, but most, is that if you put your subject on one of the verticals, watch what happens here. If I go ahead and try to put that on the rule of thirds grid, look how far off to one side the lighthouse is. It's way too much. And I think you're going to find this happens a lot. It works okay for portraits, but not for landscapes. So if we go back to rule the golden ratio right here, and now put our lighthouse on that, that's much better. In fact, I like that. Now, while we're here, what else is the issue with the composition? We want the eye to be forced to go to the lighthouse tower. The problem is the bottom here is massive. In fact, over here, this whole thing is much bigger than the lighthouse. So let's get the crop tool again and get less of it. Now, we don't want to come up this far because whenever you have something that's your subject with a base on it, you want to make sure that there's enough of a pedestal. Think of it as a sculpture on a pedestal to support the thing above. So I'm going to say, oh, something about like that. We didn't need to get rid of a lot of it, but we needed to get rid of some. And let's hit enter on that, and looking much better. Now you have to also ask yourself, is this thing too powerful in the image? I think it is, because it's kind of a big mass. Although it's not unattractive, there's a little too much of it, and it's taking away from our subject. And also, as we crop into the subject a little more, it gets bigger in the frame. I'm not going to be slavish to the grid. I'm going to put it towards the right golden ratio line, but not all the way on it. And let's do something like that. So let's go ahead and go down to effects here. And I'm going to add my favorite about -12 vignette. And again, it doesn't look like I did anything, but if I click on the eyeball here, you see with it on and off that it is darkening the edges. Now, you might have yours set differently. So just to show you, I'm going to make it 100%. So you can see how the vignette's being made. You can adjust the midpoint, which is how far it's going to come in. I'm going to leave that in the middle. You can adjust the roundness. Do you want it just going into the corners, or you want it completely round? I'm going to kind of split the difference on that. And how much of a feather do you want? You want it to be a hard or to a soft. And again, I'm just going to go with kind of the defaults in the middle. Highlights will actually allow the highlights to come through the vignette a bit more. I'm not going to worry about that either, because I'm only going to do a -12 vignette. And again, as a reminder, notice it's called a post-crop vignette because it follows the crop. So if I recrop this, which I'll do in a second, you'll see that the vignette will still be there. So here's our vignette added to it. Does the image need anything else? One more thing, one more place to go. Let's go visit the detail panel. And I'm going to get the little, I don't know what this thing's called. Let's see, what's it called? Oh, it's the detail zoom area. And I'm going to come up in here, and it will show me this part of the image at 100%. So I can go ahead and decide if I want to add sharpening and see it in this window. I'm going to add a bunch, but then I'm going to come down to the masking slider because I don't want it to sharpen the sky. If I ask it to sharpen the sky, which has all these big areas of solid color, it's just going to add grain to it. We don't want that. And if I move the masking slider, you really can't see anything happening. Not really. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key. And now when I click on the masking slider, it turns everything all white. And I'm going to drag over until I'm just getting the edges of the darker stuff. I don't want it to do anything to the sky. So now it's only sharpening where those white areas were. And I'm going to say for this particular image, I'm done. I'm going to create another virtual copy. Again, Command or Control apostrophe, and hit the crop key again. And let's say, I don't know, let's say I want a vertical out of this. So, and I'm going to be really boring. I want a vertical 8x10. You probably heard me say how much I dislike 8x10s. Here's an 8x10 shape. Does it work for this? I don't know. Maybe if you want a little print for your bathroom at your beach house, it'll work. I don't know. I don't like it, but there it is. And again, if we scroll down to our post-crop vignette and hit the eye again, notice that the vignette moved to the new crop. So that's why I always save my final cropping and vignetting to once I get back into Lightroom. And again, if we take a look, let's take a look at this full screen. There's the image we started with, and there's where we took it. Just kind of a simple, that's why that was an hors d'oeuvre. Just a simple edit, but oh, we forgot something. I forgot to get rid of this dude over here. See him right here trying to get in the door? He's got to go. I'm sorry. Let's get out of here. Let's get out of full screen. All right, let's zoom in. I'm going to zoom in a lot. Let's go 200%. And I don't know who this guy is. So let's go to one of the remove tools right here. And we're going to use the AI remove. And yeah, is it AI? No, it's not AI. Someday we'll have AI. None of the stuff we have right now is AI. So I'm going to use this tool, and let's see. I have detect objects on, which means if it thinks it's a person, it should be able to see it. So I'm going to draw around him and just fill that in and let go and see. Okay, it says that's how much area it wants to work with. And let's just click on remove and see how good a job Lightroom can do on this. And it will give us 3 choices. All right, there's 1, not bad. 2, I like better. That did a better job. And 3. 3 is a little weird. There's a little break right here. So I think the answer, I think the answer for this one is 2. And again, we're looking at this at 200%. And let's hit zoom out of that. And he's gone. If I decided there was noise here, in fact, let's look at 200% up in the sky. Yeah, really not any noise here to worry about because this is at 200%. But if you do have noise, and let's just get this out of the way because it's easy. While you're also in the detail panel, let's go back to detail, you have denoise. So let's click on that and Lightroom will go take a look at the image. It's going to zoom in actually to 300% and show you the noise level. So there, see now at 300%, of course at 300%, you can see the noise. But when we let go, it shows you how much cleaner it is. And it is pretty impressive. And it's saying, do you want to enhance 2 images because I have them both selected? Fine, we'll just go ahead and do that. And what Lightroom will do is add the denoise to both the original RAW and this one and create new files for it. So it's doing that up top, but that's enough for this image. It's time to move on. Any questions? No questions. Okay.
That people are telling you about.
Okay, no questions that Diane is receiving. So again, if you have any questions, ask Diane. All right, we're still kind of in hors d'oeuvres, but I want to do this. In fact, let me put my zoom back to let's make the zoom 50%. I find that usually more useful. All right, so I want to do a panoramic. We haven't really done many of these yet. So 1, 2, 3. This is in Capitol Reef in Utah. All right, so let's just do a basics. And people have often asked, Joe, do you ever use the auto thing? Well, not usually, but go ahead. Let's go ahead and do it. So we hit auto and it improves, but the shadows are still way too dark. So let's go ahead and override that. What did it do? Did it mess with the color too? I think it's a little too yellow. I'm not going to worry about that right yet. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hold down the shift key and click on here because these are the 3 panels for the panoramic. So I'm going to click on synchronize and just do a check all and synchronize. And now it applies those settings to all 3 files. So let's go up to photo merge, panorama. And we have a question. Yes. When do I denoise? Good question. You can do it as long as you're still in the raw state or in a DNG that you've made from raw files. So for example, I didn't denoise this. In the past, actually up until fairly recently, once you created a panoramic in Lightroom, you could no longer denoise it. They have fixed that. So I can do the denoise at the end. When you do it, does it really matter? Not really. But you can do it as long as you have a raw file or a DNG that's been made from raw files like this one.
And the next question was, were you supposed to make a virtual copy before you started to do anything to the Lighthouse?
Okay, so the question was I supposed to make a virtual copy before I did anything to the Lighthouse? No, I just do that for your benefit so we can just show the quick before and after. You can do it at any point because remember, the one basic thing about Lightroom is it's doing non-destructive editing. What does that mean? It means when you do an edit to an image, nothing's actually happening to that image. All it's doing is it's taking a thumbnail of the screen and it's showing you what will happen when this file is eventually exported to somewhere else, meaning you send it into Photoshop, you export it as another file, or you send it out to a printer. When that happens, Lightroom then builds another file to send in those directions. Up until that point, you're not actually doing anything. And in fact, the beauty of a raw file is you can't edit it. When you do an edit, you're doing edits that will be applied to a new file when you're done. You always have your original data when you have a raw file. You can mess with a JPEG. Yes, you can actually change the data in a JPEG, but you cannot actually change anything in a raw file while you're in Lightroom. Good questions. Okay, so here's our panoramic of Capitol Reef. And notice how bad the scalloping is. Notice how bad this is. Why did this happen? This happened because Joe did not have a tripod with him at this point. And this is what happens when you do, although it's an okay handheld panoramic. So what are my options? Well, we've got these three different projections. I'm going to show you one later that's going to be a little freaky. Cylindrical, spherical. Spherical is usually going to compress vertically. So let's see how that looks. Whoop, let me actually click on it. It doesn't want to try it. Come on, let's do it. All right. It's completely ignoring me now. Oh, let's turn off the auto settings. There we go. No, that wasn't it either. Huh. All right. It lets me do boundary warp. Okay. So we have these scalloped edges. What can I do with them? Well, one is boundary warp, where it's just going to take the image and it's going to stretch it into the corners. In this particular image, it kind of works, although it makes this left formation over here get taller than the main one. So I don't think that's the answer. It's going to be a problem because it makes your eye go over here. Let's try fill edges, which is Lightroom's version of content aware fill. And it's actually the only place in Lightroom where you can fill an area that is plain white. Other than that, you'd have to go into Photoshop. That actually worked pretty darn good. Yeah, I have no complaints with that. So let's go with that. So let's go ahead and hit merge. Also, this image was shot with a polarizer on the camera, and this is starting to show one of the problems that we run into when you shoot a panoramic, because as you turn, as you rotate for the panoramic, your angle to the sun is changing and the polarization becomes stronger or weaker. So here is our image, and notice how dark the sky got over here compared to over here. And this is where some of the really cool selection capabilities with the masking come into play in Lightroom. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to, let's see, let's select, I'm not going to select the sky. I want a linear gradient. And I want to start, I'm starting to see it transition around here. So I'm going to click here and drag across so that it fades in to where I think the sky is good. Obviously, I don't want to include all of the rock formations in the foreground. So what I need to do is come up to the mask we've started, click on that. Where'd my dots go? Come on. Wow, my Lightroom was all of a sudden missing some tools. That's really odd. I might have to restart Lightroom. Huh, think I do. Think I'm going to have to restart my Lightroom. So all of a sudden, my tools are missing. That's really odd. Okay, first it didn't like doing the pano, so time out. Ask me a couple of questions. I'm just going to quit Lightroom and restart it because obviously something went wacky. Any questions while we're waiting?
Let's click on the gradient.
Yeah, too late. Rick said click on the gradient. I thought I did, but anyway, I don't know why it wasn't showing up. So I see some of you are drinking coffee. I was feeling more French tonight, so I went with some Beaujolais. Okay, let's start Lightroom up again. And let's go back to that same image and see if it's going to behave now. Okay. Where were we? Now there's our grade. And see, now there's the gradient. Haven't done anything. And now my 3 dots showed up. There they are. I don't know why they disappeared. So under the 3 dots, what I want to do is I want to intersect this mask with the sky. So what does that mean? It's only going to select the gradient where it's also combined with the sky. So if it's not sky, it's not going to keep it. Then watch what happens. It just gives us a gradient across minus the sky. That is so cool and so powerful compared to the way we used to have to do things. So what's the problem? Well, it's too dark. Let's bring the exposure up. Oh, heck, that looks better already. And I may want to darken the entire sky a little bit, make the blue a little more intense, but now at least it is even all the way across and very cool. Now, conversely, I think over here, I'm going to do the color here first, but I think over here is too bright because I want you to go here. So let's just hit enter on those. Let's do a color thing. So I'm going to go to Color Mixer, get the eyedropper, and come in and pick on this color. It's not quite red enough. It should be a little bit redder. So I'm going to push it over to red just a bit, and I'm going to darken it up. And I'm going to do that by coming down to the luminosity shift here and bring that down. There we go. That's looking much better. Now, conversely, over here is a little bit too dark. So let's hit enter on that. And now I'm just going to bring up the brush. And remember, the brush is K. So I'm going to get K, and I'm going to get a nice big brush. What's my feather is at 64%. That's a pretty big feather, so that's good. But I have auto mask on. And I'm going to come in and just select these areas here. And now let's bring up the exposure here. There we go. That looks so much better. All right. Now the whole thing, I still think the whole color is off. I'm still not loving the color. I'm going to actually give you a little peek into what we're going to do in some of the color tools when we do the color deep dive in later. I'm going to show you something in Photoshop in a second. Okay, so what else is going on here? Well, the greens, the trees here actually aren't too bad, but I want them to be a little greener. So let's hit K again to give our brush. I'll make the brush smaller, and let's click. I'm just going to click on these little pine trees that should be a little greener. Whenever you have the greens have a tendency to lose their green because magenta is the opposite of green, so they cancel each other out. Question.
Does it make a difference if you intersect gradient with sky or sky intersect with gradient?
The question was, do you have to do it as, so do the gradient first and then intersect with the sky? Or could you choose the sky and then intersect it with the gradient? Either way, doesn't matter.
It is warm all the way through.
Oh, somebody needs to mute themselves.
It is. Is it too hot?
Can you mute them? Okay.
You can.
Let's see. Okay. Yeah, if you guys want to have a conversation with someone, that's great, but just mute yourself first. All right, so I'm going to add some blue, and I'm going to add some green. Oh, there we go. That brought the green life back to these things. Good. So first of all, compositionally, I'm going to deal with this now. I'm going to hit the R key, which is the crop tool. This thing is equally as big as this thing. I want this to be the star of the photograph, and this big face here is a distraction. So let's get less of it. Now, I do have the aspect ratio locked again. I'm going to leave it because I kind of like this aspect ratio. And I think something maybe about like there is the answer. However, this area over here is now still a little bit too bright up here. It's kind of okay at the bottom, but up here is too bright. So I'm going to use a linear gradient again. And again, linear gradient is M. Let's just cut to the chase and say that. I'm going to drag across like this. And what do I want to do this time? I just want to subtract the sky. So I click on subtract sky, and it gives me a gradient on this and leaves the sky alone. So now I can bring the exposure of that down. I'm also going to bring the saturation down. And I think it's a little too red, so I'm going to add green to it. This is the part where you wouldn't think adding green is the answer, but it takes away some of the red. I'm also going to darken the blacks, take a little more saturation out. Yeah, I think something like that is better. And there's more to do. But the biggest problem that I have with this right now is the color of all the sandstone around these rocks. Let's go ahead and send this into Photoshop. So I'm going to go Photo, Edit in Photoshop. All right. Oh, you saw the secret plans for my spaceship. You didn't see that. All right. So all right. So this is one of the things that we're going to go into depth when I do the deep dive on the color. There's something wrong with the color of the rocks, and Lightroom isn't really giving me the tools to be able to correct it the way I need to correct it. So what do I do? First, I'm going to select the sky. So let's make a copy of the background before we do anything. That's Command or Control J, or click on the thumbnail of the background and drag it to the little box with the plus. That will do the same thing. I'm going to select the sky. And then I'm going to invert that, which in Photoshop is actually Command-Shift-I. That's one you have to remember. But now if I scroll down here, you can see that these are called the marching ants. They're no longer up on the sky. So we're just going to do something to the base. And what we're going to do is a color balance adjustment layer. Right here, click on there. We want color balance, and then we get this. So I'm going to position this just off to one side, and I'm going to look at the rocks in here. And I'm going to go back and forth and see, well, what does it need? Well, I think it needs some red. Yep, needs a little bit of red. Does it need magenta? No, it doesn't. It actually needs a little bit of green. Yellow? No. Blue? Yes. That's the color. This is the colors that it needed for the midtones. In fact, I think it needs a little more red. Now let's click on here and go to highlights. Red? No. Cyan, no. Now, if you do it and neither of them look better, that means that balance is fine, so leave it alone. Magenta, green, magenta, green. Now, that one's fine too, so we'll leave that one alone. And then yellow, blue. Yes, it needed some yellow. And now let's go to shadows and do the same thing. So you see in Photoshop, we have a lot more control. In shadows, it needed cyan in the shadows. Magenta, no. Green, no. So that one's fine the way it is. And then yellow, no. Blue, yes. Now, these are subtle adjustments, but this kind of stuff, these kind of fine adjustments are what are going to convert your image from something that's okay color to something with great color. And if I turn this on and off, you can see the color change is subtle. In fact, let's zoom in. The color change is that's with it off. Here's with our color adjustment. And if you look closely, you can see it's added a little bit of depth to the red browns and taken a smidge of the yellow out. It's a subtle adjustment, but it is very powerful and very important. Is there more we can do in Photoshop? Sure, but we're going to be done with this. We're just going to send it back into Lightroom. And I do that simply by saving the image. Just do Command or Control S. You see down in the bottom, it's saving it. And when we tab back over to Lightroom, there it is. And you can see now it says Pano and it's a PSD file. That's our edit. What else do we want to do for here? Let's do a little bit of light painting. So I'm going to do a brush for that. So we'll get our brush. And do I want auto mask on? Yeah, for now. And I'm going to look at the areas that are dark and make them a little darker. And the areas that are light, I'm going to make them a little bit lighter. I want to kind of create a path that takes the viewer up the middle of the image to that big formation. And some of the things that are too light as well, I want to darken those. I think something like that. And I'm going to bring the exposure down. I'm also going to make it bluer. I'm going to take away some of that warmth because that will defocus where you're going. So imagine there are clouds out and about. The clouds could certainly be causing this. So let's hit K again. And now I'm going to come up through the middle. In fact, I'm going to turn off auto mask because I want it to get everywhere. Let's turn off auto mask. And I'm going to go right to the bright part of this. And in here. Now, I got a little bit on the sky. That's okay. All I have to do with the brush is click on subtract the sky, and that will clean up our messes. So again, I'm going to add some exposure. And while I'm here, I'm still going to play with the sliders. Do I want it one way or the other? Not for blue, red. Let's see, green. Yeah, it actually needs a little green. And I'm going to add some contrast back into it as well. And bring the highlights down. Okay. Now we could go messing around with this forever. Compositionally wise, again, I still think there's in this case now there's too much on the bottom. I want to keep our green shrubs there, but I want to make this all about the formation. In fact, I'm going to take a little more off the left. And yeah, I think I'm going to say I'm done. Let's go ahead and just reset the first one we did. So again, we can see we go full screen. That's what we started with, and we took that to there. Much more powerful image and a nicer shot of the place. Was it the perfect time of day for this? No, but again, these are just tools. Moving on, let's get at it. We've been spending way too much time on hors d'oeuvres. Let's move on to the soup. Oh, this is a fun one. Let's go ahead and do this. Diane's laughing at me. That happens all the time. Okay. This is actually an iPhone shot. If I hit I in Lightroom, if I hit I, it will bring up the data. So you see this is a JPEG, and it was shot with an iPhone 13 Pro Max. Fine. I'm becoming less and less enamored with my iPhone photography. I'm really avoiding it. I find it a great tool to see how Lightroom will process the image when I'm looking at a scene. I also use it when I'm out on workshops. I'll take pictures just to show composition and how zoomed in or out I think the scene is going to work best. But the thing I don't like about it is, let's take a look at this image. This was on the same little boat ride. This is actually outside of Amsterdam. But if I zoom in, let's go to 100%. Look at how hard to read the text is on the front of this thing. It's just kind of crunchy. And also, if you look at the faces real close, they've practically become paint by numbers people. There is no detail on the faces. And that's the difference between the iPhones and an actual camera. So I'm really looking forward to finding the perfect compact camera. And I'm going to talk about this in the next newsletter as well. Why I am so obsessed with finding the right compact camera for my travel photography. And it basically means having something ready all the time. And I get really frustrated with my iPhone, but I will leave that rant for another time. So let's go up to basic. I want to show you something cool you can do here. What does it need? Let's bring the highlights down. And we'll bring the shadows up somewhat. I'm not going to bring them all the way up. This thing mostly needs presence and saturation. So let's add some texture, some clarity. I'm not going to add any dehaze. It's already kind of dehazed by the phone processing. And I'm going to add a bunch of color. And as I look at it, yeah, it looks better, but I think the color's off. It's a little cyan, and what is cyan? It's kind of a green blue. So I'm going to move away from green into red a little bit, and I don't like what it does because it's affecting places I don't want affected. So we're going to need to edit these colors separately. All right, so how do we do that? Let's select the boat. I'm going to do let's do a gradient. I'm going to do M, and I'm going to select the water. And I'm going to subtract the subject. Hopefully the software will be able to tell that the boat is the subject. And it did, except for the front of the boat. So let's zoom into 100%. Yeah, it picked up this piece. So we can also subtract again. Let's hit subtract again, and we'll choose the brush. And I need a little tiny brush, and I don't want it to have much of a feather. I want it to be a fairly sharp brush. So let's zoom in at 300% so I can see what I'm really doing here. And yeah, that's better. Didn't like that. I guess the reflection was pretty close to what the watercolor was. Now, also, we have a straight line here. So what I'm going to do is click once right there, hold down the shift key, come down to the bottom where the boat hits the water, and hold down the shift and click and see it draws a straight line from where you start to where you stop. It also puts some of this part of the base in the water. Yeah, do we have to worry about this? Not sure. In fact, what I'm going to do is add some feather back, and I'm going to turn the flow down a little bit. And what that'll allow me to do is to do a soft selection. It's not going to be at 100%. Okay, so now we can hit our zoom and get out of that. Now we can adjust the water separately. So let's go to our color sliders. And as soon as we hit them, oh, there we go. Now let's not go crazy. Actually, I like that color blue. Let's just bring the saturation down a little bit. And I'm going to cut the contrast down. No, actually, I do like it. Here's the other thing I want to do, however. I'm going to hit M again. And remember, M is our gradient. I don't want the water quite so sharp. It's kind of overly processed from the phone. So I'm going to bring down the texture and the clarity of the water up front to give it a softer feel. In fact, I like that effect, and I think it's going to do a good job on the sky as well. So let's select the sky when we create a new mask. And it picked up a little bit of the mast. I'm going to have to fix that. And it did not pick up the landmass here. I'm not sure if that's going to be a problem or not. Let's try it. Let's first get rid of the mast. So let's get a brush, and we're going to have to zoom in a bunch again. Let's go to the top of the mast and see what it got. So we need to subtract this. I need to put our brush back to 100% flow. Make it smaller, and we'll do our feather very small again. And let's get the edges. I'll make the brush a little smaller than what we need to get in. Click once, come down the mast, click again, and you can see how it just does that nice straight line along these straight things. And now I can just kind of paint through here to get rid of that. Because I don't want, we're going to do that same kind of blurring, softening, and I don't want to do it on the mask. Now you can see we also have it on this front sail here. So we'll click once again here, come down to the bottom, hold down the shift key, click again. There's that lovely straight line. I can do the same thing now that I'm in a little bit. Let's just do that. And there we go. Okay, so Command or just Z. All right, so let's do the same thing. Let's soften up the sky a bit. So I'm going to bring the texture down and the clarity. I want to make it kind of a soft and a little more blue. I'm going to bring up the exposure a little bit just to kind of give it that softer look. Now the question is here now too intense as well? Let's find out. Let's get a brush again. Turn on auto mask. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than this horizon, this little whatever this, I can't remember the name of this town. And I'm going to click once here. Oop, picked up the water. Whoops, I lost my boat. Okay, brush. Let's undo that one. Let's go back up to mask. Okay. Brush. Let's make that smaller. And click once. I'm going to come across to the sail. Yeah, it's not doing a great job. We'll have to get rid of the other stuff manually. And you can see I got some of the water there. Okay, so now I'm going to have to get rid of this stuff. This is one of those things that Photoshop is still better at. And that's getting rid of stuff like this. So now I have to subtract with a brush. And I'm going to leave the feather down and going to have to do that same thing. By the way, if you're having trouble because you've already made selections and the brush won't show up because it's already something that's been selected, if you hit the H key, that will hide all of the buttons and allow you to go wherever you want. So let's go ahead and where's my brush here? There we go. Let's see. I want to go, oops, that's too much. Something about like that. So I'm going to turn off auto mask. And I'm going to select right along this horizon all the way across. And good. All right, there's a little couple little pieces that got missed. Actually, if I hold down while I'm in a minus, let's make it big so you can see. While I'm in a minus, if you hold down the Alt key, it will actually switch it over to a plus. And I've got auto mask back on. So I can go in and get these little red things that just don't want to be gotten. That's really odd. My Lightroom is acting very funny tonight. Fine, be that way. Let's lighten up this a little bit. I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit because I think the darks are too dark. Let's bring the blacks up a little. And I think the sharpness of it throws things off. I want you to go look at the boat. So once again, let's go down to effects, and I'm going to bring the clarity down and the texture. In fact, I'm going to bring down the dehaze, which is going to add haze. Let's see if we, oh yes, that's better. Okay, there we go. Now I never did the virtual copy. Let's go ahead and do that again. So I will reset the first one. Now also notice our horizon isn't quite straight, or it doesn't appear to be straight. So let's go to the cropping tool and click on the angle tool. And I'm going to click on that and drag it across what I think should be straight. And I'm going to say it's about like that. It's just a slight rotation. Doesn't that look better? While we're in the crop, there's also way too much of this scene that is not the sailboat. So I'm going to go ahead and use our grid. This is the golden ratio grid. Let's get in closer to the boat. I don't need this much on the right. In fact, I'm thinking I want to make the boat bigger. I'm thinking about something like this, and then we'll move it over a little bit. Because if I was the boat owner, I'd want the boat to be a little bigger. So let's hit enter on that. And let's add a vignette to it. And let's do a sharpening. Let's just to the subject though. So let's choose the subject. Let's create a new mask. Select the subject, which other than part of the bow, it got it. So let's go ahead and add some clarity to that to just sharpen that up. Okay. So again, let's take a look. Let's go full screen. Here's where we ended up with our iPhone shot, but that's what we started with. And we've kind of really changed the mood and softened the water up so that, again, you're not focused as much on the water and more on the boat. All right. Any questions? Moving on. Holy cow. I was going to say something else. I've got so much here and not enough time to do it all. You know what? I'll save that for next time. Let's do a composite. Seems everything I've got here is red rocks or lighthouses, but we're going to go with a lighthouse here because we're running out of time. Any questions as we get started? Anything coming through, Di? Okay. You guys are very quiet tonight. Yeah. Wakey wakies. All right. So this is Nauset Light also on Cape Cod. This is the one on the Cape Cod potato chip bag. And yeah, kind of basic stuff. Now, I don't know if everybody was here when we did this last time, but I created a preset, which was Joe's kind of default, Joe's high contrast landscape starting point. And that's not it. Here it is. Nope, this one, I guess. Yeah, and actually for this one, it's not working, so never mind. Let's go right up to our basics. And again, could I do auto? Yeah, it helps a little bit, but it's not cutting it for me. It didn't go all the way because the highlights needed to come all the way down and they needed to come up. The saturation is way low. I actually have the moon right there. See, look at that right there. Color-wise, the lighthouse is a little too orange. Yeah, but the color problems are localized. And also we've got these nice steps coming up into here. So let's go ahead and bring those into the subject. So I've got a brush with K. Let's click on auto mask. Oh, we need feather here. We lost our feathering. Let's get feathering and let's select this. And again, notice that for the most part with auto mask on, it only gets the stairs. Let's bring up the exposure. And it seems to have a slight bit of both green and yellow in it. So let's add some, yeah, need some magenta. And yeah, see, it's got too much yellow. So we need to add blue. And although it doesn't make it blue, but again, it's neutralizing it. While we're here, let's add some clarity and some texture. In fact, even some dehaze. And let's add some contrast too to make these a little stronger. I'll darken the blacks a little and then bring up the overall exposure a little bit. That looks a heck of a lot better. The trees over on the side, let's hit brush again. So we hit K again. We still got auto mask on. The shadows are a little too dark in here. So we're going to end up bringing those up and get around the lighthouse. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's bring those up. And actually that looks pretty good. That's kind of what this place looks like. And lastly, the red. I'm not thrilled with the red. It's slightly off. I've been here a bunch of times, so I know what this thing is supposed to look like. So let's go to the color mixer, get our eyedropper again and come in on the red. And, you know, I know it's off, but I'm not sure which way. So let's click on the hue shift here and drag it back and forth and see what it needs. Actually, it's not that far off. It just needs a little bit to the left, just a slight bit more red. Do we want it more saturated? More saturated, less saturated? Actually, the saturation was pretty good. And luminance, should it be brighter or darker? That's a personal, gets a little bit subjective. I actually think it should be, it's a smidge darker. That's just me. Okay. We've got too much foreground. I think the whole thing is rotated a little bit. Let's hit the crop tool and see. And actually, no, actually it's pretty straight. I think it must be the stairs that are fooling. I thought this ridge line on the house was off. Apparently it's perfect. But what's the problem? The sky, could the sky be any more boring? Yeah, it's got the moon here, but it's not big enough to really do anything for the image. Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. Now, Photoshop has the ability to replace the sky, but I don't really think it does a particularly good job of it. What I did was, while I was up here, somewhere else on the island, I took a shot of the sky when we had nice clouds. In fact, I happen to know this is in Edgartown on Martha's Vineyard. So let's take this one that we just edited. I'm going to hit the Command key and select the sky and go to Photo, Edit In, not in Photoshop, but open as layers in Photoshop. So let's go ahead. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up both files in both images in the same file. Oh, it did the order wrong. That was my fault. And drag there. So now if I turn this on and off, you can see apparently the sky one is a little bigger. Must have been because of rotation. So what do we need to do? Can Photoshop do it? Yes, we would have to create a JPEG of the sky, load it into Photoshop. It's annoying. Let's just do it manually. With our background selected, let's just go to Select Sky and see how good a job Photoshop does of it. And it actually kind of failed. Look at this.
Okay.
Look at all this stuff it missed in between the trees when we zoom way in. Well, that's not going to cut it. Let's instead use the magic wand and see how good a job it does with that. So I got the magic wand selected and I need to turn off contiguous because if I did contiguous, it's going to do the same thing. It's not going to get in amongst the trees. So let's turn that off. Click on the sky and you can see now it got down in there. Now, since my tolerance was set a little low, it didn't get the very top because it's darker up there. Just hold down the shift key. Notice that when I put the wand over the red, you can see it gets a little plus sign when I hit the shift key, which means do it again. And there we go. So now when we look down in this area, now you can see it's gotten in between enough of the branches so that we can work with it. So what we're going to do is save this. So we go to Select. Excuse me. Yeah, select, save selection. And just call it something that makes sense. I'm just going to call it sky. All right, so I'm going to deselect that. And now I'm going to get our sky. So I'm just going to hit Command A or Control A, which is select all, and then Command C, which is copy. Now I can hide this. And I need to bring back up the sky that we had just saved. So I'm going to go to load selection and click where it says channel and go to sky. And that will load in the sky that we had already selected. Now, remember when I did that select and copy of the sky, that is sitting right now on the clipboard waiting for me to do something with it. So I'm going to go to edit, paste special. Now notice it says paste into place, paste outside. The fact that these are lit up means there's something that it can paste with. If you messed up or you unselected something, those would be grayed out. So that's a sign that you need to go back and do it again. I want to do paste into. I want to take that sky from the other layer and put it into there. So now we need to do some transforming. So I'm going to hit Command T and I'm going to just move this around. Now, the first question is, do I want the color of this sky to match the color of the old sky? I'm not sure. I kind of like this, but it's a little dark. Maybe I'll do it part of the way. All right, so how do we do this? And again, this is kind of a peek into some of the things that we'll do in the deep dive class. I'm going to just offset it a little bit. All right, we're going to go deep end here. And I'm going to select the interface right there. I just wanted to see the two colors. So here's our new sky. Here's our old sky color. Can I match one to the other? There's a couple different ways to do it, but here's my favorite way. With that layer selected, come up to channels. Make this bigger. And I'm going to click on the icon, the thumbnail for red. What I need to do is adjust the levels separately of the red, green, and blue. So to do that, it's Command L. And watch what happens. As I move this left and right, you'll see the new one is changing. And right when I get there, actually, that's pretty perfect. That's all it needed. Now, what does that mean? That means the red channel on both of these before and afters match. Let's do the same thing for green. Command L. Let's move this over a little bit. I find personally it helps to squint a little bit. And I'm just looking right here and look, it's gone. They match. And now let's do blue. Same thing, Command L. Because think about it. If you match the red, green, and blue values from two different things, the colors are going to match. Yes, there's going to be a little bit of break because there's a gradient here, but that's okay. So we just wanted to get it ballpark. So now when I come back up to here, look, you can't even see the old versus the new sky. Now, when we hit the V key, let's go back to layers. When I hit the V key, I can then move this into place. And now, if I line them up, it's basically the same tone of blue. And one of the cool things about skies is you can stretch them and they don't seem to mind. So I'm going to hit Command T and stretch this thing that way. In fact, by the way, if you have a selection that is beyond your screen, like we have stuff above here we can't see, if you hit Command or Control 0, that will fit to show you the entire selection where it is. So I can also drag this up, and let's say I decide I want that to be my sky. Now, that's cool, but there's a but. What's the problem with this when we go here? The problem is, if you want to be technically correct, question. Yes. What would paste in place do? Yeah, I hate to say this, but I'm not sure. I think it'll just put it right over top of everything. I've never played with that because I know that to put it into your selection, that's how it goes. But you know, I'll have to play with that. Where was I? Oh, yes. The sky is too intense coming down to the horizon. The clouds are maybe a little too bright. And if we hit the Alt key and click on the mask, you can see, look, the mask we have is very sharp. If I want this new sky to fade in a little bit as it gets down to the horizon, what I need to do is to put a black gradient to have this area fade. So to do that, I hit the G key, which is the gradient tool. And I want basics. And I want this one. What does that mean? That means foreground to transparent. Transparent's the little boxes. The reason it's showing white is because I have white to foreground. So I flip those, and now you can see I have a black to transparent gradient. So I decide where I want black to start. I'm going to say here. I'm going to hold down the shift key so it goes straight up, and I'm going to draw a gradient from there to there. And notice that creates a soft landing in between. And since we matched the color of the new sky to the old sky, it's going to do it seamlessly. And now you can see we've got a slight fading as it gets down to the horizon. If we zoom in there, now it kind of fades in a little more gently and it looks a lot more realistic. Could I do a crop here and other stuff? Yeah, I could, but we're not gonna. Oh, actually, we are gonna do something. One more thing. Color balance. I'm still not sure about the foreground color balance. As long as we're here, let's do another one. We'll go right to color balance like we did with that other shot. And let's do that same thing. I'm just looking at the foreground. Yep, it needs a little warmth. And I didn't do any masking. I'm just doing it to the entire image. I'm dragging back and forth, looking at the steps and the brushes here to see what looks best. I think, yeah, that's good for the midtones. This is a great tool to use if you know there's something off, but you can't figure out what the heck it is. And it is somewhat subjective, but it has to look right to you. And then shadows. Let's see. No, nope, that was okay. A little bit of green and a little bit of blue. And let's turn that on and off, and you'll see it subtly affected the entire image. Did it affect the rest of the image in a way that I like? Strangely enough, it did. Doesn't always happen. I was going to mask it out, but the overall color change actually looks good everywhere. So good. Let's just save this and send it back into Lightroom where we can do our final cropping for this. Any other questions while we're moving this over? Okay. So we'll tab over to Lightroom again. And where's our image? There it is. No, that's the old one. Where's our new image? Oh, it's not in my, oh, wait, hold on. It's not in my collection for some reason. Let's go to library. I think it's this one. Nope, that's not it. Is it you? Boy, did I take enough pictures of this lighthouse? Come on, I bet you're the one that's holding out. No, that's a JPEG. Yeah, I think that one's it. Okay, cropping. What's the problem again? The stairs are overpowering. So let's hit the R tool to crop. Oh, yes. Crop. Let's come up. Let's turn off the restriction. And I kind of see this as a tall, thin image. Now, here's one thing interesting, something you should normally never do, and that's exactly put the horizon in the middle. One exception to that, for some reason, is lighthouses. When you have an interesting foreground and a sky, the lighthouse sort of joins the base to the sky. It's an interesting thing that happens. If you want to have more of the foreground, you can go ahead and do that. And even though technically this horizon is kind of dead center, it still works. Now you could make it just a little bit off. I could bring a little bit more sky down, or I could add a little bit more here. I can make it a little bit thinner and then move it over a little bit. Let's move it over to there. I don't want to cut off the house. Yeah, I'm still ending up being pretty close to the center. And let's do our, oh, the vignette was already there. And I'm happy with that. Is there more I could do? Yeah, one more thing. Let's do the brush. I'm going to turn off auto mask and I'm going to just paint a path up the stairs to the lighthouse and brighten that up a little bit. And also to separate it out, I'm going to change the color a little bit. Let's add it, make it a little bluer. Yeah, that's a little more friendly path up to the lighthouse. And let's look at that at full screen. And there's our lighthouse with our new sky compared to what we started with. So we took that from there to there. I don't replace skies that often, but this one was kind of screaming for it. And sometimes knowing how to do a little compositing is good. Strangely enough, Photoshop does not do a very good job of replacing skies. It actually is kind of messy. And you'll see a lot of times the skies will bleed into the subject matter underneath it. So learn how to do it this way. And when those times happen that you really need a new sky, something like this, it'll allow you to do it. Well, we didn't really, what time is it? It's already almost 8:40. Whoops, I don't know why I keep zooming in. Do you guys want to do one more? Yes, no? Anybody? Yeah, raise. Yep. Okay, we got one hand raised. Only one person wants to see one more, huh? Anybody else? All right, I'll do one more. You guys can always leave if you want, but
No, we got more yeses.
oh, we got more yeses. Okay. So let's do one more. We're having fun here. Let me go back to where's my collection for today? January 8th. That's today. Okay, let's see. What do I want to do? It's so many here. All right, I'm going to ask, you're going to have to type into the chat room. First person that does it gets it. Do you want to do a pano of the Bryce Arch, or do you want to do a view off the back of the Durango train, which is right here? What are the answers in the chat?
The train.
Pano train. That was train. Okay.
Back of trains. We got more trains than pens.
Okay. The pano is cool, but the train is really screaming to be done. So this time I'm going to create my virtual copy now, so I don't have to go back and do it. So this is actually right from the back of the Durango and Silverton Railroad. In fact, I have a 24 or 20 by 30 print of this that is stunning.
I want to see if anybody's heard from him.
Up against the wall there. But why does it look so bad? It's actually a perfect exposure because look at the histogram. I couldn't let this sky blow out. And you can see when I put the cursor over top of it, look under the histogram, and you can see we're at 96.6, even 98 for blue. So it was getting very close to pure white. So the exposure is perfect. Strangely enough, as dark as it looks around here, notice that the shadow clipping arrow is not lit up, which means there's nothing that is pure black in here. So let's do our basics. Let's just bring the shadows all the way up, the highlights all the way down, because now we have some room to bring this thing back up to life. All right. Okay, we're getting there. Texture. Yes, there's a lot of fine detail on here. Let's do that. Let's add some clarity. Does it need dehaze? Maybe. I'm not sure yet. Let's skip it. Vibrance for adding saturation to cool and desaturated colors, which means like the greens and the blues.
I see it.
Robert, you can't see my screen. Can anybody else not see the screen?
That's it.
Okay, everybody else sees it. So you aren't blind drunk again, are you? No? Okay. That was cruel. Saturation. Okay. It's looking a heck of a lot better.
Christina and Palisades.
And you just seen me, huh? Does everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I can't guess what's going on. Okay. All right, so you can see now we're a lot better. There's some kind of flare that happened right there. I don't know what that's all about. So let's use our remove tool. Now, do you need AI for stuff like this? No. The regular move tool or patch tool does a much better job than the AI stuff, unless you're trying to like replace Windows. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Of course, it's going to make a liar of me and select from a weird place. So what you do is just simply click on it and move it to something that kind of matches the texture of what you've got underneath, and you're good. Now, one thing I notice here is that the shadows are kind of yellow. Actually, the whole foreground down bottom is kind of a little bit too yellow. So let's hit a gradient, M, and I'm going to click in here and drag up. Notice my little lines and markers are missing. Why? Because remember when I hit that H before to hide the overlays? That's what happened. Now I hit it and I can see it better. So let's go ahead and add some blue into here because there we go. The trees were a little bit too pale. This should be a little bit bluer. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that gradient M?
Gradient is M, correct.
Good.
In fact, if you go to your masks and you click on new mask, you'll see linear gradient is M, radial gradient is shift M. In fact, we'll do a linear gradient for this image just for giggles. What else is going on? The yellows on the trees, these are cottonwoods, by the way, are still a little too pale. So let's go ahead and enter on that.
Somewhere.
Go to our color mixer again and get our eyedropper and go find one of these yellows. And you see they're a little too orange. So let's go over to the yellow a bit. Let's also bring up the luminance. Let's brighten them up. Oh yeah, that's looking a lot better. Good. Now there's also some shadows in here that are a little too dark. So we're going to get the K key for that, which again is our brush. Turn on auto mask. And I want to select just some of these dark shadows because they're too dark and they're still too yellow. So I select those, bring up the exposure. That's better. And let's add some blue to them to get rid of that kind of yellow cast. Now I want to help lead you down the tracks. And this is from the back of the train. How can I make it a more powerful image? Well, I need to find a way to accentuate the tracks a little bit more. So first I'm going to hit the crop tool and we're going to
Seeing your toilet.
4x6 shape.
That's one way.
Somebody is talking. If you can mute, whoever it is. I'm not going to go with a straight preset on my crop. I'm going to crop this one to what I think the image needs. Probably doesn't need quite as much. You can't see who that is, can you?
Mark.
Somebody named Mark V.
That's no Mark. Okay, he's muted. Okay, we're good. All right, so I'm going to crop in a little bit, make the track a little more powerful, but we still need to help this out. I want to help you get to where the track is going. So now we're going to use that radial gradient. So create new mask, radial gradient, and I'm going to do it right up the middle. And something about like that. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And I don't want it to affect the sky. So what do? Subtract sky. And there we go. Got rid of the sky. I also want to add a little bit on a little flare right down here in these corners. So let's click on add. We're going to use the brush and just add a little bit off to the side here. And I want to bring the exposure up on this part. Oh yeah, look how it opens it up. And it really is leading you to it. Now, as I've done this, the track looks perfect. Right here got a little smidge too bright. So I'm going to subtract using the brush right there. Look at that, it just got rid of it. Perfect. So I'll hit enter a couple of times. Let's go down to effects and let's add our vignette. Not much on this one. And let's go to full screen. In fact, okay, I did that intentionally. There's our original raw file, a perfect exposure because we had to protect the sky, but we turned that into that. Quite a difference. And I mean, I could hold up, I think I have the print rolled up behind me. I'll show it to you another time, but this turned out to be a stunning print. All right, we are beyond out of time. We're coming up on 90 minutes instead of 60. Any last questions? Anybody?
Joe, on this particular image, does it look like it's leaning to the right?
Oh, good point. It does a little bit. It's actually slightly an optical illusion, though. It's the trees that are leaning. But I don't disagree with you. In fact, I remember last time I edited this, I did fix that. So let's do that. Let's see what happens if we straighten that up a little bit. We're cheating a little bit because it actually was straight, but it's the trees that are fooling you, and particularly this one right here. But just doing that, because I used the level when I took this, the train was, actually, I think the train was moving at this point, but I agree with you. Good
That
catch.
looks a lot better.
There. So there's the before, there's the after. Yes, I can't have you leaning over there. You're right. I did this before I had it printed.
Great.
Any other questions? Nope, that's it. All right. Well, let me go back to let me stop my screen sharing. So if nobody has any other questions, nothing else coming through in the chat room. If not, then I will say adieu for tonight, and we'll see you at the end of January. And check out the newsletter. I'll report back from Durango and Moab and Monument Valley, and hopefully have a lot of great images to share with you. So until then, everybody be well. Thanks for joining me. And I'll see you again next time.
Safe travels.
Bye-bye.
Bye.